This is Brian Watkins, and this is a video tutorial for my Accounting 232A class to follow up on an example we did on Monday, January 30th. This is the kind of question you'll see on my exams. And what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to assess your ability to apply these principles under real-world situations. And I understand that the language is difficult, so I replaced the term guru, which is kind of slangy for a person who's highly skilled in something, with the term director, the finance director. So you'll see that's the only change I made from today. So let's read through. On January 30th, 2012, your business reaches a settlement regarding a long outstanding disputed receivable with a client who owes $1.3 million, of which $397,645 is accrued interest. Now, that immediately tells you that this was a simple interest obligation, and the client has piled up all this interest, and the interest will keep piling up. It won't bear interest on interest. Only that $1.3 million is earning interest right now. So your finance guy says, look, we've got to get this paid, so he goes into a negotiation, and they refinance the debt. When you refinance, you come out of it with a completely new obligation. And what you need to know, and an extra credit that I could ask on this test would be, why would you do this kind of a refinance? There's multiple reasons. The client may be frustrated by an inability to pay and doesn't like, maybe you are charging the client a high interest rate right now. Maybe they're paying 10%. They don't like that. So they say, tell you what, we'll give you $150,000 right now if you let us pay the rest off at 5% by the end of 2012. Okay, and you can think of any good reasons for that. Maybe they have a big sale coming up, maybe they have a stock offering coming up, but for whatever reason, this was the deal. So how do you analyze this for purposes of figuring out how much money does the bank make in the transaction? So you look at it and you realize, okay, you've made this deal on January 30th. What happens next? Well, on February 23rd, the client pays something. Okay? On June 10th, you're going to sell your client's note to the bank. And I had to put in there that your client has excellent credit. Otherwise, there's no way a bank would purchase just anybody's promissory note. Okay? So let's use that 365-day year and let's figure out what's going on. The first thing that you need to do whenever you hear the term discount and you realize this is a discount problem, you have to figure out what the maturity value is. Now, until the day that you discount the note, which in this case was June 10th, the client can make any payment the client wants. The client's not required to make a payment until the end of 2012, but in the real world, you try to pay off your debts early because then you're not paying interest. So what we have here, the wrinkle is, you got a payment between the settlement on January 30th and the discount. Now, some of you were thinking, what happens if there's a payment made after June 10th? Well, after June 10th, the bank owns the note, and the bank would immediately reinvest the money and be quite happy if somebody paid it off early. But, that's between the note holder and the bank. And I could also throw another wrinkle at you. I could say that this note does not allow for repayments. Okay, not all notes allow you to repay anytime you want. Sometimes when people make high interest rate deals, such as mortgages, you're barred, you're prevented from making repayment of the principal for a certain amount of time to allow the person who made the loan to catch up on their profit. But those are facts that aren't apparent in this problem. So don't let me confuse you. Let's go and let's solve this now. So what's the first thing we need to do? First, we need to figure out what the maturity value is expected as the day you discount the note. Let's go down here. You have $1.3 million, and that has accrued interest in it, but it was a refinance. So that little extra information becomes useless to you. It's no longer relevant how much of that is accrued interest and how much of that is principal, because it's a refinance everything starts over on January 30th. Okay. You start with the full 1.3 million and deduct the 150,000 that was paid on January 30th. So for purposes of everything you're going to do forward, you have a starting balance of 1,150,000. The extra note here is just designed to show you that you have to be careful when you read the question. $1.3 million, of which 397,645 is accrued interest. I could have said 1.3 million in principal, and they owe 397,645 in accrued interest. So you don't get yourself confused by that, because that would just cause frustration. So if you read it right, you have a starting balance now going forward of 1.150 million. Okay, your first date was February 23rd. That means you have to calculate 24 days interest on the principal. And we just talked about getting your principal amount just right. So here is your equation. Interest is principal times rate times time. So you take that 1,150,000 and multiply it times the rate, 0.5, it was 5%, so 0.05, and 24 days out of the year. And you get interest of $3,780.82. Now, if there was another payment on February 23rd that was less than this amount of interest, then you would have to carry the accrued interest forward, and you would have a different calculation, and it would be it would cause trouble in the discounting equation and things like that. Just remember that you pay the interest off first. So remember, when you have simple interest, you keep these two current. You keep the accrued interest and you pay it out first. So you get the 500,000. You take 3,780.82 cents. That leaves you a remainder of $496,219.18 that you deduct from that principal amount. So as of February 23rd, you've paid off all the interest, and you have $653,780.62. That is relevant because now you can calculate your final future value. So the only way you can do that is to take into account this partial payment that was received. So you take the $653,780.62 forward by multiplying times the interest rate on the note, and you come up with $681,723.23. That is the maturity value of this promissory note. Okay, we've calculated the maturity value. Now the discount is just a straightforward application. Discount period is June 10th to December 31st, 204 days. And the discount rate is 4%. Now your note is paying 5%. Okay, and you calculate your maturity value up here, 0.5. You calculate the maturity value with the note's interest rate. But when you take your note into the bank and say, I want to sell this to you, the bank doesn't care what the interest rate on that promissory note is. All the bank wants to know is how much money is the bank going to make on this transaction. And so the bank figures it out using the discount rate. And we talked in a prior class about how to do this equation so that you can figure out up front the amount that's a fair profit and then back into the discount, so that you could walk into the bank and say, if you loan me, essentially it's a loan, if you buy my note and you give me this much money, I will allow you to make a profit off of me of X dollars for holding this for a short period of time. That's what we do with our federal government. And I hope that by now some of you have gone to the Treasury Connect website and seen how you can purchase short-term securities from the United States government. It's kind of interesting. It's always a good idea to know how to do that, and it might help you understand this better. So now we've got the discount rate. We know the discount period. So we do the S equals 1 minus dt math. And let me just do it on the calculator once. You can follow along. Make sure you're set for RPN. 204, enter. 365 divide 0.04 times and then change sign 1 plus, and then 681,723.23 times 666,482.51. So on June 10th, you walked out of the bank with that 666,482.51. And then the bank has to wait until the end of the year to be paid by your former customer. Okay, so at the end of the year, your former customer pays off the note to the bank now, and the bank that has already paid you 666,000 and change collects 681,723.23, which you should recognize. Come back up here. It's the maturity value of the note. So everybody knew at the end of the day that that note would be paid at that time. And I had to put into the facts that your customer had an excellent credit history, because a bank wouldn't buy just anybody's note. It would have to be a company that everybody knows is going to pay it off. Let's just say that your customer was Google. Everybody thinks Google's a pretty safe bet when it comes to cash. So the bank is happy to say, sure, we'll buy that note. And for holding that note from June 10th to the end of the year, for 6 months, the bank made $15,240.72. That's pretty good. That's a simple discount. Now, I could ask questions like, how much interest rate of return did the bank make for holding that note? And that, in fact, let me type that up. I think that's important for you to know. Okay, let's step through this little extra bit that I'm going to give you. We know that the bank made $15,240.72. It essentially gave you $666,482.51 on June 10th, and then it got repaid $681,723.23 on the end of the year. So I can ask you in the test, what was the interest rate earned by the bank? And one way to do that, let's just assume that you forgot the formula for conversion. Just do interest equals principal times rate times time. So we go here and we have the $15,240.72 is the interest, because that's what the bank made by giving it to you. So interest equals principal times time times the rate, and this is just simple algebra. So what I did was I took the two numbers that were multiplied times the rate, and I divided the other side by them, so I got rate by itself. Did the arithmetic, and I came up with 0.040914,705. And if I do it backwards, if I start with that amount of money and I use that rate for that amount of time, I get $15,240.72. So it checks out. Okay, you can always figure out the interest yield by doing just the same thing. So if you forget the complicated formula that our author in the book came up with, just use your interest equals principal rate times time. That formula will get you out of just about any trouble on the test. So that's how to do a complicated test type question, and I hope that you're seeing that what I'm looking for is your ability to confidently just apply the facts that are given to you in the situation. Don't hesitate. You just write your equations down, and you know what your dates in your equation are. And if you made a little mistake, and I can see it because you wrote your work down, then it's just a correspondingly small deduction. For example, if you used 205 days by example, then I deduct 2 points for using the wrong days, but you'd still get 18 out of 20 on that question. If you rounded wrong and you came up with like 15,300, I'd take off a couple points. You'd still have a good score. So practice the skills. Remember what the homework was assigned. Look on Instructure, and we'll talk more about this on Wednesday.